Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. In the harsh Wyoming frontier of the 1870s, a widowed mother and her 2 young daughters are barely surviving, with nothing but each other and a crumbling homestead to call home. One evening, they find a bleeding stranger collapsed in the dirt outside their door. Most folks would walk away, but this family chooses differently. They bring the dying mountain man inside and nurse him back to health, never imagining what this decision will mean for their future. This weathered frontiersman carries more than just scars from a hard life. He knows secrets of survival that could save them all. But will it be enough? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind carried dust through every crack in the walls, and Sarah Brennan had long since stopped trying to keep it out. She stood at the wash basin in what passed for their kitchen, her hands raw and red from lye soap, scrubbing at a shirt that belonged to Mr. Patterson, the banker. The water had gone cold an hour ago, but she couldn't afford to heat more. Fuel cost money they didn't have. Behind her, Emma sat at the table mending a dress that had been mended so many times the original fabric was hard to distinguish from the patches. At 12 years old, her daughter had hands that should have been holding school books, not needles. But the school was 3 miles away, and they needed every hour of daylight for work that kept them fed. Lily played on the floor with corn husk dolls Sarah had made last winter, her voice soft as she invented conversations between them. 8 years old and still believing in happy endings, Sarah intended to keep it that way as long as possible. The homestead sat on the edge of Bitter Creek, Wyoming, far enough from town that most folks forgot they existed. That suited Sarah fine most days. The house itself had seen better years, probably 20 or 30 better years. Thomas had always meant to replace the roof, fix the sagging porch, reinforce the barn that leaned like a drunk after a long night. But Thomas was 2 years in the ground now, and those repairs would never come from his hands. Sarah touched the gold band on her left hand without thinking, a habit born of 2 years of widowhood. The ring had belonged to Thomas's mother before her, passed down through generations of Brennans who had actually owned things worth passing down. Now it was the only piece of gold they possessed, and she'd sooner starve than sell it. Thomas had been a good man, the kind who worked himself to exhaustion to provide for his family. He'd taken a job in the silver mine outside town when their crop failed 2 years running, swallowing his pride as a farmer to swing a pickaxe in the dark. The mine owners promised good wages and safe conditions. They delivered on neither. The cave-in happened on a Tuesday. Sarah remembered because she'd been baking bread, and the smell of it had filled the house when Sheriff Morrison came to the door, hat in his hands, eyes unable to meet hers. They'd recovered Thomas's body 3 days later. The mine owner paid for the burial and gave her $20. $20 for a husband, a father, a future. Mama! This thread's run out. Emma's voice pulled Sarah back to the present. Use the brown from the tin, Sarah said, wringing out the shirt with more force than necessary. And mind your stitches. Mrs. Patterson pays good money for careful work. Emma nodded, already reaching for the tin that held their meager sewing supplies. The girl had grown up fast these past 2 years. Too fast. She'd stopped playing with Lily's dolls and started calculating flour prices. She'd stopped dreaming about pretty dresses and started planning how to stretch a chicken into 3 meals. The house creaked around them, settling into the evening. One room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space. A single bedroom barely held the bed Sarah shared with her daughters, their bodies pressed together for warmth on cold nights. The mattress was thin and the quilts were threadbare, but they had a roof. Barely. That roof leaked in 6 places Sarah knew of, probably more she hadn't discovered yet. She'd positioned pots and pans to catch the drips when it rained, turning their bedroom into an obstacle course of clanging metal. The girls thought it was funny at first, a game to see who could avoid the most containers in the dark. Now they just stepped around them with the weary acceptance of children who'd learned that some problems couldn't be fixed. The pantry, a generous word for the small cupboard beside the stove, held precious little. A sack of cornmeal, maybe 20 pounds. Some dried beans. A small crock of lard. 6 jars of preserves put up last summer when the wild plums had been plentiful. Sarah counted every jar, every pound, calculating how long they'd last. Winter was coming, and winter was always the hardest season. She worked 6 days a week as a laundress, walking the 3 miles into Bitter Creek before dawn to collect dirty clothes from the families who could afford to pay someone else to wash them. The Pattersons, the Hollisters, the Chunns, a few others. She'd haul the bundles back to the homestead, heat water in the big kettle over the fire, scrub until her hands bled, hang everything to dry, press it with the heavy iron heated on the stove, then carry it all back to town. For this, she earned perhaps $3 a week. On good weeks, when no one complained about a stain she couldn't remove or a button that came loose. When Mrs. Patterson was in a generous mood and actually paid what she owed instead of promising, "Next time, dear." $3 a week. $12 a month. Maybe $150 a year, if they were lucky and no one got sick and nothing broke and the weather cooperated. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Emma contributed what she could, taking in mending work that paid pennies. She developed a reputation for neat stitches and careful work. And sometimes ladies brought her their good dresses, the ones that needed delicate repairs. Emma would work by candlelight after supper, her young eyes straining in the dim glow. Earning perhaps 50 cents a week if she was fortunate, Lily was still too young to work, though Sarah knew that wouldn't last. In another year, maybe 2, she'd need to find something for the youngest as well. The thought made Sarah's chest tight. Children should play, should learn, should dream. But poor children couldn't afford those luxuries. The town of Bitter Creek regarded them with a mixture of pity and indifference. Widows were common enough on the frontier. The land took husbands regularly. Mining accidents, farming accidents, shootings, sickness, the casual violence of a place where life came cheap. Most widows remarried quickly, finding another man to provide what they couldn't provide themselves. Sarah had received 3 proposals in the months after Thomas died, all from men who made her skin crawl. Edgar Hollister had been the most persistent. He owned the land office and had his fingers in half the businesses in town. A widower himself, he'd approached Sarah with what he clearly believed was a generous offer. Marriage to him would mean security, a proper house in town, education for the girls. All she had to do was accept his cold eyes, his calculating smile, and the way he looked at Emma like merchandise to be appraised. She'd refused as politely as she could manage. He'd smiled and said he understood, but something in his eyes had gone hard. Since then, he'd made her life more difficult in small ways. A late payment here, a disputed charge there, always within the bounds of legal, but never quite fair. He was a patient man, and she knew he was waiting for her to fail, to come begging for his help. She'd burn the house down before she married Edgar Hollister. "Mama, I'm hungry." Lily's small voice carried that particular tone that meant she was truly hungry, not just wanting a treat. Sarah glanced at the shelf where she kept their food. They'd had cornmeal mush for breakfast, beans and a bit of salt pork for dinner. She'd planned the same for supper, but looking at Lily's thin face, she made a decision. "Emma, fetch 2 eggs from the coop. We'll have them with our supper." "But, Mama, those are for selling. Fetch them, please." Emma recognized the tone that meant arguing was pointless. She set aside her mending and headed for the door, grabbing the egg basket from its peg. The chickens were their most valuable asset. 6 hens that provided eggs they could sell in town for 5 cents apiece. Every egg was money, and eating them instead of selling, Them was a luxury they couldn't afford. But sometimes, a mother needed to give her children something more than survival. Sarah finished with the laundry and began preparing their supper. The cornmeal mush went into the pot with water and a precious pinch of salt. She fried the 2 eggs in the smallest amount of lard she could manage, watching the edges crisp up golden. The smell filled the small house, and she heard Lily's stomach growl from across the room. They ate at the table Thomas had built when they'd first married, its surface scarred from years of use. The eggs were divided between the girls, and Sarah took only mush for herself, claiming she wasn't hungry. Emma's eyes said she knew the truth, but she ate her portion without protest. Even Lily, young as she was, understood that sometimes Mama going without meant they could have more after supper. Emma washed their few dishes while Sarah put Lily to bed. The girl was already yawning, worn out from a day of play that consisted mostly of trying to stay out of the way while her mother and sister worked. Sarah tucked the thin blankets around her, brushing hair back from her forehead. "Tell me about Papa," Lily whispered. As she did most nights. Sarah settled beside her on the bed, Emma joining them after finishing the dishes. This was their ritual, the time when Thomas came back to life through stories and memories. "Your papa was the strongest man I ever knew," Sarah began, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Not just strong in his arms, though he could lift a full-grown hog like it was nothing. Strong in his heart. He never raised his voice in anger, never lifted his hand to anyone who didn't deserve it. And he loved you girls more than anything in this world." "More than you?" Lily asked, a familiar question. "Different from me. The love a father has for his daughters is its own kind of magic." He used to say that Emma was his sunrise, all bright and steady, and you were his sunset, all wild colors and surprise. "What was Mama?" Emma asked. Sarah smiled in the dark. "He said I was the whole sky that held his sun and moon." They were quiet for a moment, holding on to the memory of a man who'd been taken too soon. Finally, Lily's breathing evened out into sleep, and Sarah rose carefully, motioning for Emma to follow her back to the main room. They sat together at the table, a single candle burning between them. Candles were expensive, but some nights Sarah needed the light more than she needed the savings. "How bad is it, Mama?" Emma asked quietly. At 12, she understood more than Sarah wished she did. "We'll manage," Sarah said, but the words felt hollow. "Mr. Hollister came by yesterday while you were in town. He said the bank might need to, what did he call it? Reassess our property taxes." Sarah's jaw tightened. "When was this?" "Just after noon. I didn't let him in the house. Talk to him through the door like you taught me." "Good girl." "What else did he say?" "That he hoped we'd reconsider his generous offer. That winter was coming, and it would be a shame if we had to face it alone." Emma paused. "Mama, he scares me." "He should. He's a dangerous man." Sarah reached across the table, taking her daughter's work-roughened hand. "But we're dangerous too, in our own way. We're survivors, Emma. Your papa taught us that. I miss him." "So do I, sweetheart. Every single day." They sat in silence until the candle burned low. Two women in a house that felt too empty, facing a future that looked too dark. Finally, Sarah rose and banked the fire for the night, preserving what heat she could for the cold hours ahead. As she lay in bed between her daughters, listening to the wind test the walls and feeling the old house creak around them, Sarah stared at the ceiling and did what she did every night. She planned. She calculated. She prayed. Tomorrow she'd walk to town again, collect more laundry, earn a few more coins. She'd smile at people who looked through her, be grateful to people who treated her like a servant, and hold her head high because pride was one thing poverty couldn't take from her. The wind picked up outside, rattling the shutters and finding every gap in the walls. Sarah pulled the blankets tighter around her daughters and closed her eyes, exhaustion finally overcoming worry. She had no way of knowing that in a few hours, everything would change. That a stranger's blood would stain their doorstep, and a choice made from compassion would alter the course of their lives forever. For now, she simply slept, a widow with 2 daughters and a failing homestead, doing her best to survive another day in a world that offered them no mercy. The simple gold ring on her finger caught a sliver of moonlight through the window, a reminder of what had been and what was lost. But it was also a promise that love had existed here once, and might again, in forms she couldn't yet imagine. Sarah woke to a sound she couldn't identify. Not the wind, not the usual settling of the old house, not an animal in the yard. Something else, a groan low and pained, coming from somewhere outside. She lay still for a moment, listening. Emma stirred beside her but didn't wake. Through the single window, moonlight painted the room in shades of silver and shadow. The sound came again, unmistakably human dot moving carefully to avoid waking the girls. Sarah slipped from the bed and reached for Thomas's old coat hanging by the door. She shrugged it on over her nightdress, then picked up the iron poker from beside the stove. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was something. The front door creaked as she eased it open. The night air hit her face, cold with the promise of the winter to come. She stepped onto the sagging porch, poker raised, eyes scanning the darkness. Thought at first she saw nothing. Then, movement near the corner of the house caught her attention. She moved closer, heart hammering, and froze. A man lay crumpled in the dirt, his body twisted at an angle that spoke of collapse rather than rest. Even in the dim light, she could see the dark stain spreading across his side. Black in the moonlight, but certainly blood. His breathing came in shallow gasps. And as she watched, his hand moved slightly, fingers clawing at the dirt, as if trying to pull himself forward. Sarah's first instinct was to run back inside. Bar the door. Pretend she'd seen nothing. Wounded men brought trouble. Everyone knew that. He could be a criminal, a drifter, someone dangerous. She had her daughters to think about. But then he made that sound again, that low groan of agony, and she found her feet carrying her forward instead of back. "Mister?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Can you hear me?" No response. She moved closer, near enough now to see details. He wore buckskin clothing, weathered and worn, but well made. A thick beard covered his face, and his hair hung past his shoulders, matted with dirt and sweat. Age was hard to determine, but she guessed late 40s, maybe older. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who'd lived hard. The wound in his side looked deep. She could see where the fabric of his shirt had been sliced clean through, the edges dark with blood. Knife wound, she thought, from the clean cut. "Mama?" Sarah turned to find Emma standing in the doorway, eyes wide. "I told you to stay inside. I heard voices." Emma stepped onto the porch, then saw the man and gasped. "Is he dead?" "Not yet. But he will be if we leave him here." "We can't, Mama. We don't know him." "He could be anyone. He's a dying man on our doorstep." "That's all we need to know." Sarah handed the poker to Emma. "Hold this. I'm going to check his wound." She knelt beside the stranger, her nightdress soaking up the damp from the ground. Up close, she could see his chest rising and falling, irregular but persistent. His skin burned with fever when she touched his forehead. The wound was worse than she'd thought, deep and still bleeding sluggishly. "We need to get him inside," Sarah said. "Mama, he's twice your size. Then we'll drag him if we have to." "Help me." Between them, they managed to roll the man onto Thomas's old horse blanket that Sarah fetched from the barn. Then, with Sarah pulling and Emma pushing, they dragged him across the yard and up the porch steps, the blanket bumping over each board. By the time they got him through the door, both were breathing hard, and Lily was standing in her nightdress, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Who's that, Mama?" "Someone who needs our help." "Emma, heat water. As much as we have." "Lily, get the clean cloths from the chest and the needle and thread. Sarah was already moving, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her. She'd helped birth calves, nursed sick chickens, tended her daughters through fevers. A knife wound was just another problem to solve. They laid him on the floor near the stove where the light was best. Sarah cut away his shirt with her sewing scissors, revealing a torso covered in scars. This man had lived through violence before. The fresh wound was angry and deep, running along his ribs. It had missed anything vital. He'd have been dead already otherwise. But infection was a certainty if she didn't clean it properly. Emma brought the heated water, and Sarah set to work, washing away the blood and dirt. The man groaned when she pressed the cloth to the wound, but didn't wake. His fever concerned her more than the cut itself. How long had he been lying in their yard? Hours? Days? As she worked, something fell from his coat pocket, landing on the floor with a soft thump. A small leather journal, its cover stained and worn. Sarah ignored it for now, focused on the task at hand. The wound cleaned, she threaded her needle with steady hands. The stitches wouldn't be pretty, but they'd hold. Emma held the lamp close while Sarah worked, pulling the torn flesh together, trying not to think about the fact that she was sewing a man like he was a torn shirt. 16 stitches. She counted each one, then wrapped clean cloth around his torso to bind the wound. Only when she was finished did she sit back, exhausted and shaking. "Will he live?" Lily asked from where she stood by the door, her corn-husk dolls clutched to her chest. "I don't know, sweetheart. We've done what we can. The rest is up to him and the good Lord." Emma picked up the fallen journal, turning it over in her hands. "Should we look?" That wouldn't be right. But even as Sarah said it, the journal fell open, and they all saw the page. It was covered in sketches plants, mostly, with careful notes beside each drawing. Edible roots, medicinal herbs, ways to find water. The handwriting was precise, despite the obvious age of the entries. Sarah flipped through a few more pages. More sketches, more notes. A map of mountain ranges she didn't recognize. Instructions for setting snares. How to read weather signs. This wasn't just a journal. It was a survival guide, compiled over what must have been years, maybe decades. "He's a mountain man," Emma said, reading over her mother's shoulder. "Look at these drawings. He knows everything about living in the wild." Sarah closed the journal carefully and set it aside. Knowledge won't help him if he dies of fever. "Emma, get the yarrow from the medicine box. We'll make a poultice to draw out the infection." They worked through the night, taking turns keeping watch over the stranger. His fever climbed higher as the hours passed, and he began to mumble in his delirium. Disconnected words that made little sense, something about a pass, about betrayal, about running. Sarah bathed his face with cool water and prayed he'd see morning. Dawn came gray and cold. The stranger still burned with fever, but his breathing had evened out some. Sarah sent Emma to do the morning chores while she watched over their patient. Wondering what she'd brought into their home. Around mid-morning, Mrs. Chun appeared at the door with a pot of broth. The elderly Chinese woman who lived a mile down the road had an uncanny way of knowing when help was needed. "Heard you took in a wounded man," she said without preamble. Her English accented but clear. "News travels fast. On the frontier, everything travels fast. May I see him?" Sarah led her inside. Mrs. Chun examined the stranger with experienced eyes, checked Sarah's stitches, and nodded approvingly. "Good work. Clean. He has a chance." She paused. "But you should know men don't get knife wounds like that from accidents. Someone tried to kill him. I know. And that someone might come looking." Sarah met the older woman's eyes. "I know that too." Mrs. Chun studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You have a good heart. But good hearts can get you killed out here. Be careful." After she left, Sarah returned to the stranger's side. She picked up the journal again, opening it to a random page. The sketch showed a plant she recognized, wild mint. Beside it, notes about its use for settling stomachs, for fevers, for wounds. She looked at the unconscious man, at his weathered face and scarred hands, at the careful stitches holding his side together. "Who are you?" she whispered. "And what kind of trouble have you brought to our door?" He didn't answer, lost in fever dreams. But his hand moved, reaching out for something only he could see. And Sarah found herself taking it, holding on to this stranger as if she could anchor him to life through will alone. Outside, the wind picked up, and somewhere in the distance, Sarah thought she heard horses. She told herself it was imagination, but her hand tightened on the stranger's anyway, and she didn't let go. 3 days passed before the fever broke. 3 days of Sarah and her daughters taking turns sponging the stranger's face with cool water, forcing broth between his lips when he was conscious enough to swallow, changing the bandages on his wound. Emma learned to mix poultices from the notes in his journal, grinding yarrow and comfrey root into paste. Lily sang to him when he thrashed in his sleep, her small voice somehow soothing even in his delirium. Sarah's laundry work piled up, but she couldn't leave him. Mrs. Patterson sent a sharp note demanding to know when her linens would be ready. Sarah sent back a terse reply saying she'd return them when she could, and lost that customer. She couldn't bring herself to care. On the third night, his fever finally broke. Sarah woke to find him staring at the ceiling, his eyes clear for the first time. She sat up from where she dozed in the chair beside him. "You're awake." He turned his head toward her, the movement careful. His eyes were gray. She noticed, the color of storm clouds over the mountains. They studied her with an intensity that should have been unsettling, but somehow wasn't. "Where?" His voice came out as a rasp. She held a cup of water to his lips, and he drank greedily. "Where am I?" "My home, about 5 miles outside Bitter Creek, Wyoming. We found you in our yard 3 nights ago, bleeding and unconscious." He processed this slowly, his eyes moving around the small room, taking in the sparse furnishings, the worn floorboards, the 2 girls sleeping in the bed beyond. "Why? Why, what? Why help me?" His hand moved to his side, feeling the bandages. "You don't know me. You needed help. That's reason enough." He studied her face as if looking for the lie, then shook his head slightly. "Most folks would have left me to die. Or worse, we're not most folks." A sound between a laugh and a cough escaped him. "No, I'm starting to see that." He tried to sit up and immediately went pale, pressing a hand to his wound. "Don't be foolish," Sarah said, pushing him gently back down. "That wound needs at least a week before you should even think about moving around. Can't stay that long. Dangerous. For whom? You're in no condition to be dangerous to anyone. Not me. You." His eyes met hers, dead serious despite the pain evident in his face. "Whoever did this might come looking. Then let them. We'll deal with it if it happens. You don't understand. I understand that you're injured and weak and in no position to go anywhere. Now rest. We'll talk more when you're stronger." He opened his mouth to argue, but exhaustion won. His eyes closed, and within moments his breathing had evened into sleep. The next morning, he was more alert. Sarah helped him sit up against the wall, propped with the thin pillows from their bed. Emma made porridge, and he ate slowly, his hands shaking with weakness, but his eyes sharp, watching everything. "What's your name?" Lily asked, sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby, her corn husk dolls arranged in a circle around her. He hesitated, as if even that simple information was dangerous to share. Jack Bridger. I'm Lily. That's Emma, and that's Mama. Her real name is Sarah, but we have to call her Mama." A hint of a smile touched his weathered face. "That so? Are you a mountain man?" "Emma says you are because of your journal." "Ova says you are because of your journal. Tuzzy Emma says you are because of your journal." She read some of it. "I'm sorry if that was wrong, but we needed to know how to make the medicine for your fever. It's all right. He looked at Sarah. You saved my life using my own notes. There's something fitting about that. Your journal is remarkable, Sarah said. The knowledge in there, it's years of learning. 30 years, give or take. Been living in the high country since I was younger than you. He nodded toward Emma. Why? Emma asked from where she stood by the stove. Don't you get lonely? Jack's face went distant. Every day. But the mountains don't judge. They don't lie. They just are. What happened to you? Sarah asked. Who stabbed you? That's a longer story than we have time for right now. He shifted, wincing. But the short version is, I saw something I shouldn't have, and powerful people don't like witnesses. Will they come here? They might. Which is why I need to leave as soon as I can walk. And go where? You can barely sit up. Before he could answer, Lily climbed to her feet and approached him shyly, holding something small in her hands. I found this in your coat. I didn't steal it, I promise. I was just looking. She held out a small wooden whistle, carefully carved from a single piece of wood. Jack's face softened in a way that transformed it completely, years of hardness falling away. I made that a long time ago, he said quietly, taking it from her. Haven't thought about it in years. Does it work? He put it to his lips and blew softly. A clear, sweet note filled the small house, like a bird call but more melodic. Lily's face lit up with delight. That's beautiful. My son liked it too. The words came out before he could stop them, and immediately his face closed off again. Sarah understood. You had a family. Once, long time ago. He handed the whistle back to Lily. You keep it. I think you'll get more use from it than me. Really? Her eyes went wide. Mama, can I? Sarah nodded, and Lily clutched the whistle like treasure, already trying to make it produce the same sweet sound. That afternoon, thunder rumbled in the distance. By evening, a storm had rolled in, rain hammering the roof and finding every leak. Sarah set out the usual collection of pots and pans, and soon the house echoed with the plink of water on metal. Lily tried to be brave, but Sarah could see the fear in her eyes. The girl had never liked storms, not since the night they'd learned about Thomas's death, when lightning had split the sky and thunder had sounded like the earth breaking apart. Jack noticed. Without a word, he picked up the whistle and began to play. Simple melodies at first, then something more complex, ancient sounding. The notes wove through the rain sounds, somehow making them less threatening, turning the storm into accompaniment rather than assault. Lily's face relaxed. Emma stopped her mending to listen. Sarah found herself sitting still, just breathing. The tension she'd carried for 3 days finally easing. When the song ended, Lily had fallen asleep curled on the floor, and the storm had passed to distant rumbling. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. Jack nodded, settling back against the wall with obvious exhaustion. You saved my life. It's a small thing. Not to her it isn't. Not to us. He looked at her for a long moment. You're good people. Better than I deserve. Everyone deserves kindness, Mr. Bridger. Jack. Just Jack. He closed his eyes. I'm going to repay this kindness. I promise you that. Once I'm on my feet, I'll help you however I can before I move on. You don't owe us anything. Yes, he said, his voice already fading towards sleep. I do. Sarah watched him drift off, this stranger who'd crashed into their lives. The whistle lay beside Lily's hand, and Sarah picked it up, examining the careful carving. Every curve was intentional, every line precise. It was the work of someone who'd had time and patience, who'd cared about getting it right. Outside, the rain gentled to a whisper. Sarah covered Lily with a blanket, then returned to her chair beside Jack. His fever was gone, but the wound would take time to heal fully. A week, maybe 2, before he could walk without pain. A month before he'd be truly recovered. A month. The thought should have worried her another mouth to feed, a stranger in their home, possible danger following him. But instead, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, hearing Lily's peaceful breathing, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Thought maybe it was foolish. Probably it was. But for now, in the quiet after the storm, she allowed herself to hold on to it. By the second week, Jack insisted on being useful. Sarah found him trying to stand on his own, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort. She scolded him back to sitting, but the next day he was up again, this time making it to the table before she could stop him. "You're going to tear those stitches," she warned. "Then sew me up again." But he sat down heavily, breathing hard. "I can't just lie here while you work yourself to death." "I've been working myself to death long before you arrived, Mr. Bridger." "Jack," he corrected automatically. "Then, that's my point. Let me help." He started small, sharpening their knives, which had been dull so long Sarah had forgotten what a sharp blade felt like. He produced a whetstone from his pack, one of the few possessions he'd had with him when they found him, and worked the edge with practiced motions, the rhythmic scrape soothing in its repetition. "A dull knife is more dangerous than a sharp one," he explained to Emma, who watched with fascination. "Makes you work harder, more likely to slip. A good edge does the work for you." He showed her the proper angle, the right amount of pressure. "Feel that? That's how you know it's sharp enough." He handed her their kitchen knife, now with an edge that caught the light. "Try it on that carrot." Emma sliced through it like butter, her eyes widening. "It's like magic. It's practice and knowing how. Most things worth doing are." Over the following days, he taught her more. How to hold a blade properly, how to maintain it, how to use it safely. From his pack, he produced his own knife one, the wooden handle carved with notches that seemed to mark time or events. "How long have you had it?" Emma asked, turning it over in her hands with reverence. 23 years. Carried it through every season, every storm, every moment that mattered." He pointed to the notches. "Each one is a memory. What do they mean?" He touched one near the handle. "First winter I survived alone. Thought I'd die that year. Another halfway up. The time I escaped a grizzly by climbing a tree and staying there for 2 days. A third near the top. Someone I helped who couldn't help themselves." "How many people have you helped?" "Not enough." His face went distant. "Never enough." Lily appeared at his elbow, having watched from the corner. "Will you teach me too? You're a bit young for knives." "I'm 8. Mama says that's old enough to be helpful." Jack looked at Sarah, who shrugged. "She's not wrong. Out here, children grow up fast." So Jack taught Lily too, starting with a butter knife and a soft potato, showing her the basic motions. She took to it with the seriousness of a child given an adult task, her tongue poking out as she concentrated. Sarah watched from the wash basin, hands in soapy water, and felt something shift in her chest. This felt right, natural, as if Jack had always been here, teaching her daughters the skills they'd need to survive. "You're good with them," she said that evening after the girls had gone to bed. Jack sat at the table, carefully oiling his knife. "I had a son once, Jacob. He'd be about Emma's age now if—" He stopped, clearing his throat. "I remember what it was like, teaching him things. Felt like passing on something important. What happened to him?" "Sickness. Him and his mother both. Cholera swept through our settlement 22 years ago. I was out trapping, came back to." He stopped again, and this time didn't continue. Sarah moved to sit across from him. "I'm sorry. It's why I went to the mountains. Couldn't stay where everything reminded me of them. The high country doesn't remember, doesn't mourn. It just exists, and that was easier to bear. But you came down from the mountains. Had to. Supplies, trade, information. And this time I saw something I shouldn't have. Testified when I should have stayed quiet." thought justice mattered more than survival. He laughed bitterly. Learn my lesson there. Justice does matter. Not to powerful men, not when it threatens them. They sat in silence for a moment, the oil lamp flickering between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. Tom is my husband. He believed in doing right even when it cost him. Even when it cost us. That's why he took the mining job. We needed money, and the mine paid better than farming ever could. He knew it was dangerous, but he did it anyway. That makes him brave or foolish. Maybe both. Probably both. But I loved him for it. She twisted the ring on her finger. Still do, I suppose. You don't stop loving someone just because they're gone. No, Jack agreed quietly. You don't. The next morning, Jack assessed their situation with brutal honesty. He'd been watching, taking stock of their resources, their condition, their prospects. Sarah could see the military mind working behind those gray eyes, calculating, evaluating. You won't make it through winter, he said bluntly over breakfast. Not like this. Sarah's spine stiffened. We've made it 2 winters already. Barely. And you know it. He gestured around the small house. Leaking roof. Gaps in the walls. Your stores wouldn't feed a family of 3 for more than 2 months, and winter lasts 5 out here. You're working yourself to exhaustion for pennies, and your girls are doing the same. We manage. Managing isn't living. His voice softened. I'm not criticizing. I'm offering help. We can't pay you. I'm not asking for pay. You saved my life. I owe you. More than that, I want to help. He leaned forward. I know how to survive out here. Really survive, not just scrape by. Let me teach you what I know. Emma spoke up from where she was clearing the breakfast dishes. We don't have much choice, Mama. Winter's coming, and we're not ready. Sarah looked at her daughter's serious face, at Lily listening with wide eyes, at Jack watching her with something like understanding. Her pride warred with her practical nature. Pride had kept them afloat for 2 years, but it wouldn't keep them warm when the snows came. All right, she said finally. What do you suggest? Relief crossed Jack's face. First, we need protein. Real protein, not just the occasional egg. I'll teach you to set snares for rabbits and squirrels. They're plentiful in these hills, and we can preserve the meat for winter. I don't know how to skin or preserve. I'll teach you. All of you. He looked at Emma. You're old enough to learn hunting, and Lily's old enough to help with the preparation. That afternoon, despite Sarah's protest that he wasn't strong enough, Jack walked them into the hills behind their property. He moved carefully, one arm pressed to his healing wound, but his eyes were alert, reading the land like Sarah read words on a page. Look here, he said, kneeling beside some tracks in the soft earth. Rabbit. See how the back prints are ahead of the front ones? That's how they move. He showed them how to identify game trails, where to set snares, how to make them from materials they had on hand. Emma absorbed every word, her mind clearly working through the information, filing it away. Can I try? She asked. Not yet. Watch first. Learning to hunt is like learning anything else. You have to understand it before you can do it. They spent 2 hours in the hills, Jack pointing out edible plants, showing them how to find water, teaching them to read the signs nature left. By the time they returned home, Sarah's head was spinning with new information. That evening, they checked the snares Jack had set. 2 rabbits caught cleanly. Jack showed them how to dispatch them quickly, how to skin and gut them with minimal waste. It was hard work, and Lily turned away during the skinning, but she stayed to watch the rest. The rabbit stew Sarah made that night was the best meal they'd had in months. Real meat, thick and rich, with wild onions Jack had identified. Even Lily, who'd been squeamish about the preparation, ate 2 full bowls. Best supper ever, Mr. Jack, she declared, her face smeared with gravy. Jack smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You did the hard part, helping prepare it. This is your meal as much as mine." Later, after the girls were asleep, Sarah found Jack outside, standing in the yard, despite the cool night air. She wrapped a shawl around herself and joined him. "You shouldn't be out here. Your wound is healing fine." He looked up at the stars, brilliant in the clear sky. "I spent most of my adult life looking at these stars. From mountain peaks, from valley floors, from places you couldn't reach unless you wanted to badly enough. Do you miss it? Parts of it, the silence, the simplicity. Everything in the mountains is honest. The cold will kill you. The heat will dry you out. The animals will eat you if you are not careful. But if you respect it, work with it, instead of against it, it'll keep you alive. Is that what you're teaching us? To work with the land instead of against it? That, and to stop just surviving. To live." He turned to look at her. "You've been holding on by your fingernails for 2 years. That's brave, but it's no way to exist. You deserve better. Your girls deserve better. And you're going to give us that? I'm going to try. For however long I'm here." And then he was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Haven't thought past healing up and moving on. That's been the pattern for 5 years. Now never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Sounds lonely. It is. It is. But it's safe." Sarah pulled her shawl tighter. "Sometimes safe isn't enough." Jack looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the reflection of her own loneliness, her own exhaustion, her own hope for something better. "No," he agreed quietly. "Sometimes it isn't." They stood together under the stars, two people who'd lost too much learning to hope again. While inside the house, two girls slept peacefully, their bellies full for the first time in memory. A month passed, and the homestead transformed. Jack's wound had healed enough for him to work, and work he did. The leaking roof was patched with materials he gathered from the forest, strips of bark carefully layered and sealed with pine pitch. He reinforced the sagging porch, replaced rotted boards, chinked gaps in the walls that Sarah had lived with for 2 years. "Where did you learn all this?" Emma asked, watching him fit a new support beam under the porch. "Army, mostly. Spent 10 years as a scout before I went full-time into the mountains. Had to build shelters, repair equipment, make something from nothing. You learn fast when your life depends on it." "Were you in the war?" Jack's hands stilled for a moment. "Yes, not something I talk about much." Emma knew enough not to push. She'd learned that Jack shared things when he was ready, not when pressed. Instead, she held the beam steady while he secured it, learning through doing as he preferred to teach. The real treasure came the evening. Jack spread his map across the table. It was hand-drawn on what looked like deer hide, carefully preserved and added to over the years. Every line was precise, every notation meaningful. Sarah studied it with wonder. "You made this yourself?" "Over 30 years. Every trail I've walked, every water source I've found, every safe camp and dangerous pass. It's not just geography, it's survival knowledge." The map covered territory Sarah had never imagined. Mountain ranges stretching north into Montana, south into Colorado, west to the California territories. Jack's finger traced routes, explaining as he went. "This pass here closes by mid-October. Try to cross it after that, and you'll freeze. But this one, lower down, stays open until December if you know the way." He pointed to another marking. "Hot springs here. Good for washing, for warming up, for healing. The Indians knew about them long before we did." "Where did you live?" Lily asked, her chin propped on her hands as she stared at the map. Jack pointed to a spot high in the Rockies. "Here, mostly. Small valley with good water, decent game, sheltered from the worst of the winter winds. Built a cabin there years ago. Probably fallen down by now." "Why did you leave?" "Because I saw something I shouldn't have, testified about it, and now I can't go back." His voice carried regret. That cabin was the closest thing to a home I'd had in 20 years. Over the following days, Jack taught them to read the map, to understand the symbols he'd created. Emma absorbed it all, her finger tracing routes while Jack explained the challenges and rewards of each path. "Could we use these trails?" she asked. "If you had to. But I'm hoping you'll never need to run." He glanced at Sarah, though knowing how to disappear isn't bad knowledge to have. The work continued. A smokehouse rose beside the barn, built from green wood and river stones. Jack showed them how to preserve meat properly, how to cold smoke fish, how to store food so it would last through the hardest months. The town's attitude toward them began to shift. Word spread that Sarah had taken in a mountain man, and opinions were divided. Some thought her foolish, inviting trouble. Others were grateful when Jack fixed things they couldn't fix themselves. Mrs. Chan's fence, sagging and dangerous, was rebuilt in an afternoon. The blacksmith's wagon wheel, cracked beyond what he thought was repair, was mended with a technique Jack had learned from the Shoshone. A difficult calf birth at the Peterson farm was managed successfully with Jack's help. He never asked for payment, never expected gratitude. "I'm just passing through," he'd say. "Might as well be useful while I'm here." But Sarah noticed how he moved through town, always aware, watching, his hand never far from the knife at his belt. Whatever had happened to put that wound in his side, whoever he was watching for, they weighed on him constantly. Edgar Hollister noticed too. He made a point of running into Sarah one afternoon when she was in town collecting laundry. "Mrs. Brennan, I see you've acquired a house guest. Mr. Bridger is recovering from an injury." "Yes, I heard about that." Funny thing, a man showing up wounded like that makes a person wonder what he was running from. Hollister smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "Or who he was running from. I don't see how that's any concern of yours, Mr. Hollister. Everything in this town is my concern. I own the land office, several businesses, have friends in the territorial government." He stepped closer, and Sarah fought the urge to step back. "I'd hate to see you harbor a criminal. That could reflect poorly on you. On your girls. Mr. Bridger is no criminal." "Are you certain? Have you asked him about his past?" "Really asked?" Hollister's eyes gleamed. "I have connections, Mrs. Brennan. I could make inquiries. Find out who he really is. Do what you feel you must, Mr. Hollister. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." She walked away with her head high, but her hand shook as she loaded the laundry bundles. Hollister's words had planted seeds of doubt she didn't want to acknowledge. What did she really know about Jack Bridger? He told them bits and pieces, but never the full story. Never explained exactly what he'd witnessed or why someone wanted him dead. That evening, she found Jack working on the smokehouse, adding final touches to the structure. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "We need to talk," she said. He set down his tools immediately, reading something in her voice. "What happened?" "Hollister. He's asking questions about you. Says he has connections, can find out your past." Jack's face went carefully neutral. "He probably can. Men like that usually have reach. Is there something I should know? Something that would put my daughters at risk?" "Yes." His honesty surprised her. "I told you I witnessed something, testified about it. What I didn't tell you is who was involved. A judge's son in Montana. Rich, powerful, protected. He murdered a Cheyenne family father, mother, 3 children. I watched him do it and testified at his trial. Or tried to. The judge made sure I was the one accused instead." Sarah's breath caught. "Did you kill them?" "No, but I couldn't prove my innocence. So I ran. Been running for 5 years." He met her eyes. "That's who I am, Sarah. A wanted man. Someone who chose truth over survival and has been paying for it ever since. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I was hoping to be gone before it mattered." before whoever's hunting me tracked me here. He looked away. I should leave. Tonight. Before I bring more trouble to your door. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing. Everything in her life had taught her to be cautious, to protect her daughters above all else. But everything about Jack Bridger told her he was telling the truth. She'd watched him with her girls, seen his gentleness, his patience, his fundamental decency. No, she said finally. Sarah, no, you're not leaving. Not until you're fully healed, and maybe not even then. She stepped closer. I believe you. I don't know why, but I do. And we're stronger together than apart. You don't know what you're saying. These people, they're dangerous. So, are we? You've taught us to hunt, to preserve food, to survive. You've made us stronger. Now let us stand with you. Jack looked at her, and she saw something crack in his carefully maintained walls. I don't deserve this. Don't deserve you. Maybe not, but you have us anyway. They stood in the fading light, two people who'd been alone too long, finding something like home in each other's presence. Finally, Jack nodded. All right, but we prepare. If trouble comes, we need to be ready. Then teach us. That night, after the girls were asleep, Jack began teaching Sarah to shoot. They went into the hills behind the house where the sound wouldn't carry to town. He produced his rifle, a well-maintained weapon that had clearly seen years of use. Thomas taught me the basics, Sarah said, handling the rifle with more confidence than Jack expected. Show me. She sighted down the barrel at a tree trunk 20 yards away, adjusted her stance without being told, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit 6 inches left of center. Not bad. Your breathing was off, and you jerked the trigger instead of squeezing smooth. Try again. They practiced until the moon was high, Sarah's accuracy improving with each shot. Jack was impressed despite himself. She had steady hands and good instincts, learning from each mistake instead of repeating it. You're a natural, he said as they walked back to the house. I'm a widow with 2 daughters on the frontier. I had to be. Thomas was a lucky man. Sarah smiled sadly. I was the lucky one. He was good and kind and strong. Everything a husband should be. She paused. But he's gone, and I have to be those things now. For Emma and Lily, you already are. They reached the house and stood on the porch, neither quite ready to go inside and end the moment. Jack, Sarah said quietly, what you did testifying against that man, even though it cost you everything, that was brave. It was stupid. It was both, but mostly brave. She touched his arm briefly. Thank you for telling me the truth. Thank you for believing me. Inside, they found Emma sitting at the table, the map spread before her in the lamplight. She looked up as they entered. I couldn't sleep. I was studying the routes. She pointed to a trail marking. If we had to leave quickly, this would be the best way, wouldn't it? Through the low pass, avoiding the main roads. Jack and Sarah exchanged glances. You heard, Sarah said. Some. Enough. Emma's face was serious beyond her years. If people are looking for Jack, they might come here. We should have a plan. Jack pulled out a chair and sat beside her. You're right. Smart thinking. He traced another route on the map. This is where we go. There's a valley here. Hard to reach, but safe. We could survive there through winter if we had to. How long would it take to get there? 3 days. Maybe 4 with young ones. But we'd need supplies, preparation. He looked at Sarah. This isn't just about me anymore. If Hollister starts making inquiries, if the wrong people hear I'm here, you could all be in danger. Then we prepare for that, Sarah said firmly. Emma, tomorrow you and I will start putting together emergency packs. Food that won't spoil, warm clothes, basic tools. Jack, you make sure we know those routes by heart. Emma nodded, already making notes on a scrap of paper. We should cache supplies along the trail too, in case we have to leave with nothing. Where did you learn that? Jack asked, surprised. Your journal. You wrote about how to survive when you're being hunted. I read it all. Jack laughed, a sound of genuine pleasure. You're going to do just fine, Emma Brennan. Both of you are. They planned late into the night. 3 people bound by circumstance becoming something more. A family, perhaps, or at least the beginning of one. When Sarah finally lay down to sleep, Emma and Lily warm on either side of her, she felt something she hadn't felt since Thomas died. Not just hope this time, but purpose. They would face whatever came together, and they would survive. Outside, Jack took first watch, his eyes scanning the darkness for threats that might never come. But if they did, he'd be ready. They all would be. 2 months after Jack's arrival, the first snow fell. Light flurries that dusted the ground and melted by noon, but a reminder that winter was coming in earnest. The homestead was ready in ways it never had been before. The smokehouse hung with preserved meat. The root cellar was stocked with vegetables and herbs. The roof no longer leaked, and the walls kept out the wind. The family had found a rhythm. Emma rose before dawn to check snares and tend the animals. Lily helped with cooking and mending, her small hands surprisingly deft. Sarah continued her laundry work, though she had fewer customers now. Word had spread that she was harboring a stranger, and some folks didn't approve. Jack did everything else: repairs, hunting, teaching, watching. Always watching. He never fully relaxed, never let his guard down completely. Sarah noticed but didn't comment. She understood the weight of carrying danger. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Jack sat at the table polishing something small. Sarah brought him coffee and saw what he held, a silver compass, gleaming in the lamplight. I've never seen you with that before, she said. He looked up, then down at the compass in his hand. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he opened it, showing her the inscription inside the cover. To my beloved husband, may you always find your way home. ME 1851. Sarah read it aloud softly, her voice catching on the words. Your wife, Mary Ellen. We married when I was 22 and she was 19. 15 years we had together. 15 years of her laugh, her cooking, her way of making everything better just by being there. He ran his thumb over the inscription. She gave me this on our 5th anniversary. Said even when I was out trapping for months, I'd always be able to find my way back to her. What was she like? Jack smiled, lost in memory. Strong. Stronger than me in the ways that mattered. She could deliver a calf, shoot a rifle, bargain down a trader, and make the best cornbread you ever tasted. But she was soft too, when it counted. Gentle with our son, patient with my moods, full of grace I never earned. And your son? Jacob, 5 years old when he stopped, cleared his throat. He had her eyes. Brown, warm, always curious. He wanted to know everything. Why birds flew, why water was wet, why the sky changed colors. I used to get frustrated with all his questions. Now I'd give anything to hear one more. Sarah reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Tell me what happened. All of it. So he did. The words came slowly at first, then faster, as if a dam had broken. He told her about the settlement in Missouri, the cholera outbreak, the helplessness of watching them sicken. How Mary Ellen had held Jacob even as the fever consumed her, singing to him until she couldn't sing anymore. How Jack had been away when it started, returning to find them both dead and buried. 2 fresh graves next to the small church. I couldn't stay, he said. Everything there was them. Our house, our bed, the chair where she'd rock Jacob. I gave it all away and headed west, as far as I could get from the memories. But you kept the compass. Couldn't let go of everything. He closed it carefully. For years, it was all I had of them. Then I built a life in the mountains, and the pain got quieter. Not gone, never gone, but bearable. Do you still use it to find your way? Sometimes. Mostly, I just carry it. A reminder that once someone thought I was worth coming home to. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. You are, Jack. You're worth coming home to. He looked at her then. Really looked, and she saw the loneliness there. The years of isolation. The walls he built to protect himself from feeling anything again. But she saw something else too, a crack in those walls. A possibility that maybe he could risk caring again. Sarah, whatever he was going to say, was interrupted by a knock at the door. Jack was on his feet instantly, hand on his knife, body between Sarah and the entrance. Sarah rose more slowly, her heart pounding. Who is it? Jack called out. Sheriff Morrison. I need a word, Mrs. Brennan. Sarah moved to the door, Jack staying close behind her. She opened it to find the sheriff on her porch, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. Evening, ma'am. Sorry to bother you so late. What's this about, Sheriff? Morrison's eyes flicked to Jack, then back to Sarah. Got some papers here. From the bank. Edgar Hollister brought them by earlier. Sarah's stomach dropped. Papers? Yes, ma'am. Seems there's a question about your property taxes. Outstanding debt going back 3 years. Bank's calling it in. He handed her an official-looking document. Says here you got 30 days to pay, or they'll foreclose. Sarah scanned the paper, her hand shaking. Numbers swam before her eyes, amounts that made no sense. Penalties and interest compounded beyond anything reasonable. This is wrong. Thomas paid our taxes every year. That may be, but these records say otherwise. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brennan. I'm just delivering the notice. After he left, Sarah sank into a chair, the paper crumpling in her grip. Jack took it gently, reading through it with a frown that deepened with each line. This is fraud, he said flatly. These charges are manufactured. Look here, double entries for the same year, fees that don't exist, calculations that don't add up. It doesn't matter if it's fraud. It's official. It has the bank seal, and Hollister's fingerprints all over it. Jack set the paper down. He wants your land. This is how he's taking it. But why? This land isn't worth anything. The soil's poor. There's no water rights. Nothing valuable. Asterisk, there's you. And your refusal to marry him. Jack's voice was hard. Men like Hollister don't like being told no. He'll take your land, force you into dependence, and then offer his generous help again. Sarah looked around her small house, at the improvements Jack had made, at the life they'd built. I won't give it to him. This is my home, my girl's home. Then we fight. Jack pulled out a chair, sitting across from her. But we need to be smart about it. Hollister has the law on his side, at least on paper. We need leverage. I don't have any leverage. I'm a widow with no money and no connections. But I did, anyway. He was quiet for a moment. Before the mountains, before the running, I was an Army scout. Worked with officers, government men, people who valued truth and service. Some of them might still remember me. That was years ago. 30 years. But the Army keeps records, and men like that keep their word. If I can get word to the right people, prove I was framed, maybe we can use that to pressure Hollister. You'd risk exposure? Risk them finding you? I'm already exposed. If Hollister's making inquiries, it's only a matter of time before someone makes the connection. He leaned forward. Sarah, you saved my life. You and your girls gave me something I thought I'd lost forever: family, purpose, home. I'll risk anything to protect that. The compass sat on the table between them, its silver surface reflecting the lamplight. Sarah picked it up, feeling its weight, understanding what it represented. A promise to come home, a belief that home was worth fighting for. Then we fight together, she said. They worked late into the night making plans. Jack would reach out to old contacts, trying to find someone willing to listen to his story. Sarah would document everything, every payment Thomas had made, every transaction they'd had with the bank. Emma, listening from the bedroom doorway, offered to search town records for evidence of Hollister's other schemes. "You should be asleep," Sarah said when she noticed her daughter. "I can't sleep knowing we might lose our home." Emma came fully into the room. "Let me help. I'm small and quiet. People don't notice me. I can listen, watch, find things. It could be dangerous. So is doing nothing." Emma's face was set with determination that reminded Sarah painfully of Thomas. "This is my home too, Mama. Let me fight for it." Jack and Sarah exchanged glances. Finally, Sarah nodded. "All right, but you're careful. No risks. And you tell us everything you hear." "I will." Emma hugged her mother fiercely. "We're not losing this house. Not after everything we've survived." After Emma went back to bed, Jack and Sarah remained at the table. The compass sat between them, a reminder of promises and homes and the courage it took to protect both. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, "for staying, for helping, for—" she paused, searching for words. "For being here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "For 22 years, I've been running from the memory of home. Now I'm running toward it." Sarah reached out, taking his hand. His calloused fingers closed around hers, gentle despite their strength. "Then let's make sure we have something to run to," she said. Outside, the snow began to fall again, heavier this time. Winter was coming in earnest, and with it, the battle for their future. But inside the small house, 3 people and 2 girls were ready to fight. Together, they were stronger than the sum of their parts. Together, they might just survive what was coming. Jack looked down at their joined hands, then at the compass on the table. For the first time in over 2 decades, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Home wasn't a place on a map. It was this people who cared, purpose that mattered. A reason to stand and fight instead of running away. He just hoped he could keep them safe long enough to deserve it. Emma's trip to town 3 days. Later was meant to be routine. Pick up flour from the general store, drop off mending at Mrs. Patterson's house, listen for gossip. She'd done it a dozen times since Jack had arrived. Each time coming back with small pieces of information. Who's meeting with whom, which families were struggling, what Hollister was planning. But this time was different. She was at the general store, counting out coins for the flour when she saw it, pinned to the wall among notices for church socials and missing cattle. A faded wanted poster with a face she recognized. The sketch was rough, the man younger, the beard shorter. But the eyes were unmistakable. Gray as storm clouds, intense even in a simple drawing. Jack Bridger. Wanted for murder. Montana Territory, 1869. Reward, $500. Emma's vision tunneled. The store sounds faded to a distant buzz. Her hand froze halfway to the counter, coins forgotten. $500. That was more money than her family would see in 5 years. More money than most people in Bitter Creek would see in a lifetime. "You all right, Emma?" Mr. Chun's voice seemed to come from far away. "Ah, yes, fine." She forced her hand to move, dropping the coins on the counter, grabbing the flour sack. "Thank you, Mr. Chun." She walked out into the bright afternoon, the poster burning in her mind. Wanted for murder. Jack was wanted for murder. The man who'd fixed their roof, who taught her to hunt, who played his whistle for Lily during storms. A murderer. Mrs. Chun was outside her shop, sweeping the boardwalk. She took one look at Emma's face and set the broom aside. "Come inside," she said, not making it a question. Emma followed numbly. The small shop smelled of herbs and tea, comforting smells that did nothing to calm the storm in her chest. Mrs. Chun poured tea with steady hands, then sat across from Emma at the small table. "You saw the poster. How did you know?" "Because I saw your face, and I saw Jack Bridger's poster go up this morning." Hollister put it there himself, looked quite pleased about it. Mrs. Chun sipped her tea calmly. So now you have a choice to make. I don't understand. You understand perfectly. You know that man is wanted. You know there's a reward. You know your family is desperately poor. The old woman's eyes were kind but unflinching. The question is what you're going to do about it. Emma's hands shook around her teacup. He killed people. The poster says he killed people. Do you believe it? Emma stopped. Did she believe it? Jack had killed animals for food, taught her to do the same. But that was different from murdering people, wasn't it? I don't know. Then perhaps you should ask him before you make any decisions that can't be unmade. Emma stumbled home in a daze, the flower heavy in her arms, the poster image heavier in her mind. She found Jack in the barn, reinforcing the stall doors for winter. He looked up when she entered, saw her face, and immediately set down his tools. What happened? Emma pulled the poster from her coat pocket. She'd taken it down, folded it small, hidden it. Now she unfolded it with trembling hands and held it out. Jack looked at it for a long moment, his face going carefully blank. Where did you find this? General store. Hollister put it up this morning. I see. He took the poster, studying his own younger face. I suppose it was only a matter of time. Is it true? Emma's voice cracked. Did you kill those people? Jack was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sat down on a hay bale, gesturing for her to sit beside him. She did, leaving space between them that hadn't been there yesterday. I'm going to tell you something, and you can choose whether to believe me or not. Either way, I'll respect your choice. He spread the poster on his knee. 5 years ago, I was trapping in Montana territory. Good land, plenty of game. I had a camp near a creek, isolated, peaceful. One afternoon, I heard gunshots. Multiple rifles. I went to investigate. His voice was steady, but Emma could hear the strain beneath it. I found a Cheyenne family's camp. Father, mother, 3 children. All dead, all shot. And standing over them was a young man in expensive clothes, holding a rifle, laughing with his friends about the sport. Emma's stomach turned. Who was he? Clayton Harrison, son of Judge Marcus Harrison, one of the most powerful men in Montana. I watched him and his friend rifle through the family's belongings, taking what they wanted, leaving the bodies for the animals. Jack's jaw tightened. I couldn't let that stand. So I confronted them. What happened? They ran. I gathered the bodies, buried them properly, went to the territorial marshal with what I'd seen. There was a trial. I testified. But Judge Harrison, Jack laughed bitterly. He was the judge presiding. He made it look like I was the one being accused. Manufactured evidence, intimidated witnesses, twisted everything. By the end, I was wanted for the very murders I'd tried to report. But surely someone believed you. A few, not enough. Harrison had too much power, too much influence. I was advised by friends to run, that staying would mean hanging for crimes I didn't commit. He looked at Emma directly. So I ran. I've been running ever since. The knife wound, Emma said slowly. When we found you, Harrison's men, they tracked me to a trading post outside Bitter Creek. I escaped, but barely. Collapsed in your yard, half dead. He paused. If you want to turn me in, I won't fight it. $500 would change your family's life. Emma stared at the poster. $500. They could pay off the fraudulent debt Hollister claimed. Keep the house. Buy supplies for years. A mother wouldn't have to work herself to exhaustion. Lily could have new dresses, proper shoes. All she had to do was turn in the man who'd saved them. Did you take anything from the bodies? She asked suddenly. Jack frowned. What? The Cheyenne family. Did you take anything from them? As proof? Understanding dawned in his eyes. The knife. The one Clayton Harrison used. It had fallen near the bodies. I took it, thinking it might be evidence. It has his initials carved into the handle, C. H. He was proud of that knife, had it custom made. Where is it? Hidden, in the barn, beneath the floorboards under the tack room. I couldn't risk keeping it with me, but I couldn't throw it away either. It's the only proof I have. Emma stood abruptly. Show me. Jack led her to the tack room, pulled up 2 loose boards, and drew out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside was a knife, beautiful and terrible. Bone handle carved with intricate designs, and there, clear as day, the initials CH worked into the grip. This is evidence, Emma said. Evidence no one will look at. Harrison's too powerful. Maybe he was then, but things change. People change. Emma wrapped the knife back up carefully. We're not turning you in, Jack. We're clearing your name. That's impossible. Mama says impossible just means nobody's figured out how yet. She met his eyes. You're family. We don't abandon family. We fight for them. Jack's face crumpled for just a moment before he regained control. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I don't deserve you. Any of you. Probably not. But you're stuck with us anyway. Emma tucked the wrapped knife under her arm. Come on. We need to show Mama. They walked back to the house together, the poster and the knife carried between them. Sarah was inside, working on laundry, and she looked up as they entered. One glance at their faces, and she set down the wash paddle. What's wrong? Emma laid the poster and the knife on the table. We need to talk. Sarah listened as Emma explained, her face growing more serious with each word. When Emma finished, Sarah picked up the poster. Studying it with the same intensity she'd studied the fraudulent debt papers. So Hollister knows, she said finally. He put the poster up himself this morning. Emma confirmed. Then this isn't just about the land anymore. This is about Jack. Sarah looked at him. What aren't you telling us? Jack shifted uncomfortably. I didn't make the connection at first. Harrison Judge Marcus Harrison. I should have realized. Realized what? Edgar Hollister. He's from Montana originally. I heard him mention it once in town. And his interest in me, the timing of the debt papers. Jack's face darkened. He's connected to Harrison. Has to be. This isn't coincidence. Sarah sat down slowly. You're saying Hollister is working with the man who framed you? Or for him. Harrison wants me dead, and he'll use whoever's available to make that happen. Hollister probably sees it as an opportunity. Eliminate me. Take your land and earn favor with a powerful judge. 3 birds with 1 stone. But why wait? Emma asked. If he knows who you are, why not just have you arrested? Because he wants to be sure, wants to build a case, make it look legal and proper. A warrant takes time, especially out here. He's probably sent for one, but until it arrives, he's relying on pressure and intimidation. Jack looked at Sarah. I should leave. Tonight. Before the warrant comes and takes all of you down with me. No. Sarah's voice was firm. We're past that now. If Hollister's connected to Harrison, if this is all linked together, then running won't solve anything. They'll still take our land, and you'll still be hunted. So what do we do? Sarah looked at the knife, the poster, her daughter's determined face, and felt something click into place. We do what Jack said. We fight. But we don't fight fair, and we don't fight alone. She stood, moving with purpose now. Anna, tomorrow you're going to visit every family in Bitter Creek that Hollister's wronged. And there are many I've heard the stories. Mrs. Chun, the Petersons, the Johnsons. Find out what he's done to them. Document it. Jack, you're going to write down everything about Harrison, about the murders, about the trial. Names, dates, everything. We're going to build a case so solid, even Hollister's connections can't ignore it. And you? Jack asked. I'm going to call in every favor I'm owed. Reach out to every person who's ever been grateful for our help. We're going to show Bitter Creek exactly who Edgar Hollister is." And then she picked up the knife, its blade catching the light. "We're going to give them proof they can't deny." Emma grinned fiercely. Lily appeared in the bedroom doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What's happening?" "We're fighting back," Sarah said. "All of us together." Jack looked at this family that had taken him in, saved him, now preparing to risk everything to save him in return. The walls he'd built around his heart for 22 years crumbled completely. "Thank you," he managed, "for believing me." "We don't just believe you," Emma said. "We know you, and we're going to make sure everyone else does too." Outside, storm clouds gathered, but inside the small house, surrounded by people who'd become family, Jack Bridger felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but certainty. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, and together. They just might win. The next 3 days moved with the intensity of a building storm. Sarah, Emma, and Jack worked with focused determination, each playing their part in a plan that grew more ambitious by the hour. Emma moved through town like a ghost, quiet and unnoticed. She visited Mrs. Chun first, who welcomed her with tea and stories. Hollister had tried to claim her property 2 years ago, citing unpaid taxes that Mrs. Chun could prove she'd paid. Only intervention from her brother, a newspaper editor in Cheyenne, had stopped the seizure. He preys on widows, immigrants, anyone without strong connections, Mrs. Chun said, her wrinkled face set with anger. "My brother has files on him. Suspected fraud, intimidation, connections to corrupt officials, but no proof strong enough to act on. What if we had proof?" Emma asked. Mrs. Chun's eyes sharpened. "Then my brother would be very interested." The Petersons had a similar story. Hollister had bought their debt from the bank, then demanded payment in full or foreclosure. They'd sold their best breeding cow to pay him, only to discover later the debt had already been satisfied. The blacksmith had been overcharged for his shop lease, with Hollister pocketing the difference. The schoolteacher had been pressured to resign after refusing. Hollister's romantic advances. Emma documented everything in careful handwriting, names and dates and amounts. The pattern was clear. Hollister had spent years building wealth through intimidation and fraud, protected by connections to powerful men who benefited from looking the other way. While Emma gathered evidence, Jack wrote. His account of the massacre was detailed and devastating. He described the Cheyenne family's camp, the sound of gunshots, the scene he'd discovered. He named Clayton Harrison and his 3 companions, all sons of wealthy families. He described the trial, the manufactured evidence, the intimidated witnesses who'd suddenly remembered seeing Jack near the camp earlier that day. Sarah read it with tears in her eyes. "This is damning. If anyone reads it, Harrison's reach is long. Then we make it longer." Sarah had spent her time differently, visiting every family that owed them kindness, calling in 2 years of favors. The result was surprising more people were willing to help than she'd imagined. The sheriff's deputy, who'd always been decent to her. The telegraph operator, whose daughter Emma had tutored. The preacher, who remembered Thomas fondly. "People are tired of Hollister," the preacher said when Sarah visited his modest home. "But they're afraid. He has power. What if we took that power away?" "How?" "By showing everyone the truth. All at once, before he can stop it." The preacher considered this. "You'd need a public forum. Somewhere he couldn't shut you down. Like a town meeting?" "Like a town meeting." He smiled slowly. "And as it happens, we're due for a quarterly meeting next week. I could make sure the notice goes out, mention there will be important business discussed. Would Hollister attend?" "He never misses a chance to intimidate people publicly." "Yes, he'll be there." The plan took shape quickly after that. They would present everything at the town meeting. Emma's evidence of fraud, Jack's testimony, the knife with Harrison's initials. They would force Hollister to answer publicly for his crimes and hoped that sunlight would be enough disinfectant for corruption. But there was one more piece they needed. "We need someone with authority," Jack said on the third night as they reviewed their preparations. "Someone Hollister can't intimidate or dismiss. The territorial marshal would be ideal, but getting one here in time. I sent a telegraph 3 days ago." Sarah interrupted quietly. Everyone stared at her. "You what?" "To the territorial marshal's office in Cheyenne. I told them about the fraud, about a wanted man who might be innocent, about Judge Harrison's possible involvement. I asked them to send someone to investigate." She looked at Jack. "I used your name. I'm sorry if that was wrong, but we needed help beyond what this town could provide." Jack was silent for a moment, then laughed, a sound of genuine surprise. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish." "Probably both," Sarah admitted. "But the telegraph operator is on our side." He made sure the message went through without Hollister knowing. If the marshal's office takes it seriously, someone should arrive within the week. That's cutting it close. The town meeting is in 4 days. Then we hope they arrive in time. And if they don't, we proceed anyway. The bone-handled knife sat on the table between them, wrapped in cloth. Jack had carried it for 5 years, unable to let go of the only evidence of Clayton Harrison's guilt. Now it might be the key to his freedom and their survival. "There's something else we should consider," Emma said quietly. "If we do this, if we expose Hollister and connect him to Harrison, we're not just making enemies of them. We're making enemies of everyone they're connected to. Powerful people." "I know," Sarah said. "But what's the alternative? Let them take our home? Let Jack hang for crimes he didn't commit? Live in fear for the rest of our lives? No, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm saying we should be ready for what comes after." She was right, and they all knew it. That night, while Lily slept, the three of them made additional preparations. Jack showed Sarah and Emma the escape routes on his map, pointing out the caches of supplies he'd hidden along the trails. "If things go wrong, if we need to run, you follow this path here. 3 days to the valley I mentioned. There's a cabin there, hidden. Not much, but it's shelter." "You've been preparing for this," Sarah realized, "since the day I could walk again. I won't let you suffer for helping me." They packed emergency supplies, food that wouldn't spoil, warm clothes, basic tools, and hid them in the barn. Jack cleaned and loaded his rifle, teaching Sarah the maintenance rituals. Emma sharpened all their knives to razor edges. They were preparing for war, though they hoped diplomacy would prevail. On the 4th day, with the town meeting that evening, Emma made one final trip to town. She was supposed to confirm who would be attending, to gauge the mood, to watch for any signs that Hollister suspected their plan. She returned at noon, breathless and pale. "What happened?" Sarah asked immediately. "Judge Harrison. He's here. He arrived this morning with 4 men. They're staying at Hollister's house." Jack went very still. "Harrison himself came?" "I saw him step out of a coach. Older man, expensive clothes, hard face. Hollister greeted him like they were old friends." "Then they know," Jack said flatly. "They know we're planning something, or at least suspect it. Harrison doesn't travel from Montana on a whim." "Could be coincidence," Sarah offered weakly. "Could be. But I don't believe in coincidences. Not where Harrison's concerned." Jack stood, pacing. "This changes things. If Harrison's here, he'll try to take control of the meeting, spin the narrative his way. And if he brought men, then he's ready for violence," Sarah finished. "We need protection. From whom?" "The sheriff answers to Hollister. The deputy's sympathetic, but 1 man against 4 isn't odds I like. Then we don't rely on official protection." Sarah's face set with determination. "Emma, how many families did you talk to? How many have been hurt by Hollister?" "At least 15. Maybe 20. And how many of those families have men who can handle themselves?" Understanding dawned on Emma's face. Most of them. The Petersons, the blacksmith, Mrs. Chun's sons, the miners. Then we asked them to come to the meeting armed and ready. Not to start trouble, but to finish it if Harrison's men try anything. Jack looked at her with something like, "Ah, you're proposing we turn a town meeting into a standoff. I'm proposing we show them we're not afraid. That we'll defend the truth, whatever it costs." By late afternoon, word had spread through a network of trusted families. The town meeting that evening would be unlike any other. People would come armed, though quietly. They would stand together against the corruption that had plagued them for years. And they would demand answers. Sarah put on her best dress, the one she'd worn to church when Thomas was alive, and braided her hair carefully. She looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 2 years of widowhood had aged her, but also strengthened her. She looked like someone who could face down a corrupt judge and win, or die trying. Jack was in the main room when she emerged, wearing clean clothes Emma had mended for him. He trimmed his beard and pulled his hair back. The mountain man was gone, replaced by someone who looked almost civilized. Almost. "You look different," Sarah said. "So do you. Ready for battle. Are we going to survive this?" Jack came to her, taking her hands in his. "I don't know. Harrison's dangerous, and he doesn't forgive. But I know this. I'd rather stand with you and lose than run alone and live." Sarah squeezed his hands. Thomas used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified. Thomas was a wise man. He was. And he'd want me to fight for our home, for our girls, for the truth. She looked up at Jack. "For you." Before he could respond, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. Thomas's pocket watch, gold and worn, the glass face cracked from years of being carried. "I want you to have this," she said. "Sarah, I can't. You can. You're family now, Jack. Whether we survive tonight or not, you're family. And this," she pressed the watch into his hand, "this is so you know that. So you remember you're worth coming home to." Jack's fingers closed around the watch, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't have words for what you've given me. All of you. Then don't use words. Just promise me that whatever happens tonight, you won't run. That you'll stand with us. I promise. Until the end, whatever that looks like." Emma appeared in the bedroom doorway, Lily beside her. Both girls were dressed in their Sunday clothes, faces scrubbed clean, hair carefully braided. They looked young and vulnerable and absolutely fierce. "Are we ready?" Emma asked. Sarah looked at her small family, 2 daughters. One mountain man, all of them bound by something stronger than blood. Love, maybe. Or loyalty. Or simple human decency in a world that often lacked it. "We're ready," she said. They walked to town as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Other families joined them along the road, forming a silent procession. The Petersons, the Chums, the blacksmith and his apprentice, miners still dirty from their shift, farmers with weather-beaten faces, women who'd been widowed or wronged or simply tired of being afraid. By the time they reached the town hall, there were perhaps 50 people, all moving with purpose. Inside, they could see lanterns being lit, chairs being arranged. And through the window, they could see Edgar Hollister standing with an older man who could only be Judge Harrison, both of them looking confident and controlled. "Last chance to turn back," Jack said quietly. Sarah took his hand on one side, Emma's on the other. Lily held Emma's other hand, creating a chain of family and trust. "No turning back," Sarah said. "Not now. Not ever." They climbed the steps together and pushed open the doors to the town hall. Every eye turned to watch them enter. Hollister's face went tight with anger. Harrison's remained impassive, but his eyes were calculating. Dangerous. The room was crowded, more people than had attended a meeting in years. And they kept coming, filing in behind Sarah's group, filling every seat and lining the walls. The message was clear. This wasn't Hollister's town anymore. It belonged to all of them, and they were taking it back. The preacher called the meeting to order, his voice steady despite the tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. "We have significant business tonight," he said. "Matters of justice, truth, and the soul of this community. Mrs. Brennan has requested the floor. I believe we should hear what she has to say." Hollister stood immediately. "I object. This meeting has an agenda, which includes any business relevant to the town's well-being," the preacher interrupted. "Unless you'd like to argue that fraud, corruption, and murder are relevant?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Harrison's face remained calm, but his hand moved to his vest pocket where Sarah was certain he carried a weapon. "Then, by all means," Hollister said with false courtesy, "let Mrs. Brennan speak. I'm sure we'll all find it enlightening." Sarah stepped forward, Jack beside her, Emma carrying the documentation they gathered. The bone-handled knife was wrapped in cloth on the table before them. "My name is Sarah Brennan," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "And I'm here to tell you about the man who's been stealing from this town, who's been lying, cheating, and protecting murderers. His name is Edgar Hollister, and tonight the truth comes out." The battle had begun. Sarah's words hung in the air like thunder. The crowd shifted, some people nodding, others looking uncomfortable. Hollister's face had gone red, but Harrison remained perfectly still, watching with the patience of a predator. "Asterisk. That's slander," Hollister said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Sheriff, arrest this woman for what?" Sarah cut him off. "Speaking the truth? Let me show you truth, Mr. Hollister." Emma stepped forward, placing the first document on the table. "Mrs. Chun, 2 years ago, you claimed she owed back taxes. She paid them, but you tried to seize her property anyway. Here's her receipt, dated and witnessed." Mrs. Chun stood from her seat. "It's true. I had to get my brother, a newspaper editor, involved before he backed down." "The Petersons," Emma continued, placing another document. "You bought their debt from the bank, demanded immediate payment, forced them to sell their best livestock, but the debt had already been satisfied. Here's the bank's own record, which they mysteriously couldn't find until I went through their files myself." Mr. Peterson stood, his weathered face hard. "Cost us our breeding cow. That cow was worth more than the supposed debt." Document after document hit the table. The blacksmith's inflated lease, the schoolteacher's forced resignation, 3 families with fraudulent tax claims, 2 widows pressured to sell their land at pennies on the dollar. The pattern was undeniable. "These are forgeries," Hollister sputtered. "Lies manufactured by a desperate widow and a wanted criminal." "Then let's talk about wanted criminals," Sarah said, her voice sharp as broken glass. She turned to Jack. "Mr. Bridger, would you tell these people your story?" Jack stood slowly, and Sarah could see the effort it took for him to face this room full of strangers, to expose his past and his pain. But his voice, when he spoke, was steady. "5 years ago, in Montana Territory, I witnessed a murder. 4 men shot and killed a Cheyenne family, parents, and 3 children. I saw it happen, and I testified at the trial." He paused. The man who led that massacre was Clayton Harrison, son of Judge Marcus Harrison. "The same Judge Harrison who's sitting in this room right now." The crowd erupted. Harrison stood, his face finally showing emotion-cold, controlled rage. "This man is a convicted murderer," Harrison said, his voice cutting through the noise. "He was tried and found guilty. He's wanted in Montana Territory, and I demand he be arrested immediately." "By you?" Jack shot back. "You presided over your own son's trial. You falsified evidence, intimidated witnesses, and had me accused of the very murders your son committed. Prove it." "Gladly." Jack unwrapped the cloth on the table, revealing the bone-handled knife. Its carved surface caught the lamplight, and the initials CH were clearly visible. "This is the knife your son used. It has his initials, his custom design. I took it from the scene as evidence." Harrison's mask slipped for just a moment. His eyes locked onto the knife with something between recognition and fear. Then the mask returned. "A knife proves nothing. You could have stolen that from my son at any time." "Could have." "Didn't." Jack's voice was hard now. "Everyone in this room knows what you are, Harrison. You're a man who'll do anything to protect his son, even if it means sending an innocent man to the gallows. The question is whether this town will let you keep doing it." The sheriff's deputy stepped forward, a young man named Miller who'd always been fair. "Judge Harrison, I'd like to examine that knife. And I'd like to send a telegraph to the territorial marshal about these accusations." "You have no authority." "Actually, I do. Sheriff Morrison isn't here tonight, which makes me the ranking law enforcement. And these accusations are serious enough to warrant investigation." Harrison's hand moved toward his vest pocket. The four men he'd brought with him shifted, hands on their weapons. The room went deadly still. "I wouldn't," came a voice from the back. The territorial marshal, a gray-haired man named Thompson, stepped into the room. "Judge Harrison, I believe we need to have a conversation." Sarah's knees nearly gave out with relief. The marshal had come. They had official support. But Harrison wasn't finished. "Marshal Thompson, what brings you to Bitter Creek?" "A very interesting telegraph from Mrs. Brennan here. Allegations of fraud, conspiracy, possible wrongful conviction. Thought it warranted a personal visit." Thompson walked forward, his eyes taking in the knife, the documents, the tense faces. "Now, would someone like to explain exactly what's going on?" Sarah stepped forward, Thomas's watch in Jack's pocket, her daughters behind her, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Marshal, I'd like to report multiple crimes. Fraud, intimidation, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. And I have proof of all of it." Hollister moved then, reaching for something. But the blacksmith was faster, catching his arm in a grip like iron. "I don't think so," the blacksmith said quietly. "You sit down and listen. For once in your miserable life, you listen." The confrontation hung on a knife's edge, literally and figuratively. One wrong move and violence would erupt. But Sarah stood her ground, Jack beside her. Their small family facing down powerful men who'd ruled through fear for far too long. The truth was out. Now they'd see if truth was enough. Marshal Thompson examined the knife with careful attention, turning it over in his hands, studying the initials. Then he looked at the documents Emma had compiled, reading through each one with the methodical patience of a man used to building cases. "These are serious accusations," he said finally. "Judge Harrison, you're going to need to answer some questions." "I don't answer to you, Thompson. I'm a territorial judge who presided over a trial involving your own son. That alone is grounds for review." Thompson's voice was calm but carried authority. "And this evidence suggests conspiracy and corruption. So yes, you do answer to me. At least until we sort this out." Harrison's composure cracked further. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. I have connections that reach to the territorial governor. I know. I reported directly to him before coming here." Thompson smiled grimly. "He's very interested in allegations against a sitting judge, especially when there's this much documentation." The room was silent now, everyone watching the power dynamic shift. Hollister tried to stand, but the blacksmith's hand remained firmly on his shoulder. "What about him?" Hollister pointed at Jack. "He's wanted for murder. I have the poster, based on a trial presided over by a judge who had a conflict of interest," Thompson interrupted. "That warrant is now under review. Until it's resolved, Mr. Bridger isn't going anywhere. Except maybe as a witness." "Witness?" Harrison's voice rose. He's a murderer. Then let's hear from someone who might know differently. Thompson turned to the crowd. Anyone here have knowledge of these events? Anyone who can corroborate either story? Silence. Then, slowly, an older man stood near the back. Sarah recognized him, a trapper who came through town occasionally, selling furs. He was weathered and scarred, the kind of man who'd seen the worst of frontier life. "I know about it," he said, his voice rough with age and tobacco. "Was trapping in Montana 5 years back. Heard about the massacre, heard about the trial. And I heard what folks said who actually knew Jack Bridger." He jerked his chin toward Jack. Side he was honest. Side he testified true. But Harrison's money was louder than truth, and Bridger had to run or hang. "And you kept quiet about this?" Thompson asked. "Wasn't my fight, but I kept track of it. Heard Harrison's boy bragging about killing Indians like it was sport. Heard him show off that knife." He pointed at the bone-handled blade. "That's the one. Saw it myself in a saloon in Helena." Clayton Harrison was drunk and stupid, showing it around like a trophy. Harrison lunged for the door, but his own men blocked him, not to help, but because Deputy Miller had his gun drawn and pointed. "Nobody moves," Miller said, his young face set with determination. "Not until we sort this out proper." "There's more." Mrs. Chun's voice cut through the tension. She stood, holding a folder. "My brother is a newspaper editor. When I told him what was happening here, he sent me this. Articles about Judge Harrison. About other trials with questionable verdicts. About families who accused him of taking bribes, intimidating witnesses, protecting the wealthy while hanging the poor." She walked forward, placing the folder on the table beside the knife and documents. "He's been corrupt for years. This town just happened to be where it finally caught up with him." Thompson took the folder, scanned the contents, and his face grew darker with each page. "Judge Harrison, I'm placing you under investigative custody, pending a full review of your judicial conduct. Your son Clayton will be brought in for questioning regarding the murders of the Cheyenne family. You can't, I can, and I am. Mr. Hollister, you're also under investigation for fraud, conspiracy, and corruption. I'll be examining every land deal, every transaction, every claim you've made in the past 5 years." Hollister's face had gone from red to white. "This is insane. You have no authority. Actually, the territorial governor gave me full authority when these allegations came to light. Seems there have been complaints about this town for a while. You've been operating like your own little kingdom, Hollister. That ends tonight." The 4 men Harrison had brought looked at each other, then slowly backed toward the door. Thompson let them go. They were hired hands, not worth pursuing. But Harrison and Hollister were trapped, surrounded by townspeople who'd suffered under their rule for too long. "What about our land?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the surreal nature of watching powerful men fall. "The dead Hollister claims we owe?" Thompson examined those documents, compared them to the bank's actual records Emma had found, and shook his head. "Fraudulent. The debt was satisfied 2 years ago. Mr. Hollister created false documents to justify foreclosure." He looked at Sarah directly. "Your land is yours, Mrs. Brennan. Free and clear." Sarah felt Jack's hand find hers, felt Emma's arm around her waist, heard Lily's small gasp of relief. They'd won. Against all odds, against powerful men with money and connections, they'd won. "Mr. Bridger," Thompson said, turning to Jack, "I'll need you to give a full statement. Everything you witnessed, everything that happened at the trial. It'll be used to review Harrison's cases and possibly overturn wrongful convictions. Will I be cleared? Can't promise that officially yet, but between your testimony, this evidence, and the witness statements I'm collecting," Thompson gestured to the trapper and others who were nodding, "I'd say your chances are good." "Very good." Jack's grip on Sarah's hand tightened. She looked up at him and saw tears in those storm-gray eyes, not of sadness, but of hope. Of freedom earned through courage and truth. Hollister made one last desperate move, lunging toward the door, but he ran straight into the blacksmith, who caught him like catching a child. "Where do you think you're going?" the blacksmith asked, almost gently. "Your days of running this town are over." Marshal Thompson took Hollister and Harrison into custody, Deputy Miller assisting. As they were led from the town hall, the crowd erupted, not in violence, but in something like celebration. Years of oppression ending in one night. Truth finally winning over corruption. Sarah turned to her family, because that's what they were now, a real family. Emma was crying and laughing at the same time. Lily clung to Jack's leg, her small face beaming. And Jack looked down at all of them with an expression Sarah had never seen on him before. Peace. Pure. Absolute peace. "Is it really over?" Emma asked. "The hard part is," Sarah said. "Now we get to do the good part. Living without fear." Jack pulled Thomas's watch from his pocket, looked at it for a long moment, then smiled. "Time to go home," he said, and together, as a family, they did. Spring came early to Wyoming that year. Or perhaps it just felt that way because the winter had been kind. 6 months had passed since the night at the town hall, and the homestead looked nothing like it had when Jack first collapsed in their yard. Sarah stood on the porch, no longer sagging but solid and true, watching the morning sun paint the hills gold. The garden was planted, rows of vegetables already showing green shoots. The barn had been expanded, and inside they had 3 new calves and a dozen chickens. The smokehouse was full, the root cellar stocked, and for the first time in years, Sarah wasn't counting every coin with desperate precision. Life had changed in ways, both large and small. Judge Harrison was awaiting trial in the territorial capital, his judicial power stripped. Clayton Harrison had confessed under questioning, breaking down and admitting to the murders of the Cheyenne family and 3 other incidents he'd never been questioned about. The confession had made newspapers across the territory, and calls for justice reform were growing. Edgar Hollister was in prison, convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and a dozen other charges. His properties had been seized, his ill-gotten gains returned where possible to those he'd cheated. The town of Bitter Creek was rebuilding its reputation, becoming known not for corruption, but for the community that had stood together against it. And Jack Bridger was a free man. The official exoneration had come 3 months after the town hall meeting. Marshal Thompson had presented the evidence, the witness testimony, Clayton's confession. The warrant was voided, Jack's name cleared, and a formal apology issued by the territorial government. It didn't give him back the 5 years he'd spent running, but it gave him his future. The question had been what he'd do with that future. Emma emerged from the house, now 13 and looking more like a young woman every day. She carried 2 cups of coffee, handing one to her mother. "Jack's almost done with the new room," she said, settling beside Sarah on the bench Jack had built. "Says he'll have it finished before the photographer comes this afternoon." "Good. I want everything perfect for the picture." Emma smiled. "Mama, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be us." "You're right." As always, Sarah sipped their coffee, watching Jack emerge from the side of the house where he'd been building an addition. The new room would give the girls their own space, a luxury they'd never had. Jack had asked to stay on after the exoneration, not as a guest or a hired hand, but as family. Sarah had said yes without hesitation, and neither of them had rushed into anything more than that. They were building something slowly, carefully, with the patience of people who'd learned that good things were worth waiting for. But the town knew. Everyone knew. When Jack walked into the general store with Sarah, people smiled. When he sat beside her at church, nobody questioned it. And when Emma called him Papa that first time accidentally, then deliberately when she saw his reaction, the whole community had simply accepted it as truth. Lily came running from the barn, her face flushed with excitement. At 9, she was still young enough to find joy in small things, but old enough to understand how much their lives had changed. The kittens opened their eyes. She announced, "All 5 of them. Can we keep them all? Please?" "We'll see," Sarah said, the eternal mother's response. "Go wash up. The photographer will be here soon." Lily ran off, still chattering about the kittens. Emma followed to help her change into her good dress, leaving Sarah alone on the porch. Alone, but not for long. Jack climbed the steps, brushing sawdust from his shirt. At 49, he looked younger than he had when they'd found him bleeding in their yard. The gray in his beard was still there, the lines around his eyes, but the weight of being hunted was gone. He moved with an ease he'd never had before. "Room's finished," he said, sitting beside her. "Just needs furniture. We'll work on that." "Thank you, Jack, for everything. You keep thanking me. I should be the one thanking you." He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural over the months. "You saved me. Not just my life, but," he struggled for words, "you gave me a reason to stop running, to stand still and build instead of always moving. You did the same for us. We were just surviving before you came. Now we're living." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the day brighten. Finally, Jack spoke again. "I've been thinking about making it official." "Official?" "You, me, the girls. A real family, legal and proper." He turned to face her. "Sarah, I'm not good at pretty words. I spent 20 years alone in the mountains because I thought I didn't deserve anything else. But you showed me different. You and Emma and Lily showed me that some wounds heal, that some losses don't have to be permanent, that a man can come home even when he thought home was lost forever." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Jack Bridger, are you proposing marriage?" "I am. I know it's not fancy, and I don't have much to offer except hard work and loyalty, and—" She kissed him. It was the first time, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, both were smiling. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you, properly and legally and in front of everyone, even though I'm a former mountain man with a spotted past. Especially because of that. You're the bravest man I know, Jack. Not because you survived the wilderness, but because you chose to stay when staying was harder than running." Movement in the doorway made them turn. Emma and Lily stood there, both in their good dresses, both grinning widely. "About time," Emma said. "We've been waiting for you two to figure it out." "Can I be a flower girl?" Lily asked. "Mrs. Chun said I could borrow her daughter's dress from when she got married." "Yes," Sarah laughed. "You can be the best flower girl this town has ever seen." An hour later, the photographer arrived. He set up his equipment in the yard, the homestead as backdrop. It took time to prepare, to position everyone just right. But finally, they were ready. Sarah and Jack sat in chairs the photographer provided. Emma stood behind her mother, one hand on Sarah's shoulder. Lily stood beside Jack, her small hand in his large one. They were dressed in their finest clothes, faces scrubbed clean, hair carefully combed. "Everyone stay very still," the photographer instructed. "This will take a moment." In that frozen moment, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. Thomas's death and the years of struggling alone. Jack's arrival, bloody and desperate, and her choice to help him. The months of learning to trust, to hope, to become a family. The night they'd stood together against corruption and won. All of it leading to this moment, this family. This home. The flash went off, capturing them forever, a widow who'd become strong. A mountain man who'd found his way home. Two girls who'd learned that family wasn't just blood, but choice and commitment and love. "Perfect," the photographer said. "That's the one." And it was. The photograph would hang in their home for decades, a reminder of the day they became official. But more than that, it was proof that sometimes the smallest act of kindness, pulling a dying stranger inside and nursing him back to health, could change everything. That evening, after the photographer had packed up and left, after supper was finished and the dishes were clean, the family gathered on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Jack played his whistle softly, a melody he'd composed just for them. Emma studied his map, planning trips they'd take together into the mountains. Lily played with her corn husk dolls, now joined by fabric ones Jack had helped her make. And Sarah sat among them, Thomas's ring now on her right hand, ready to make room for a new ring on her left. The past treasured but not controlling the present. The future bright with possibility. "I love this," Lily said sleepily, her head against Jack's shoulder. "I love all of us together." "So do I, sweet girl," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "So do I." Sarah looked at her family, her daughters, her soon-to-be husband, their small homestead that had been transformed from a place of survival to a place of thriving. She thought about the question Jack had asked that first conscious day. "Why help me?" "Because it was the right thing to do," she'd said then. She still believed that. But she understood now that it had been more than duty or kindness. It had been hope. Hope that mercy would be rewarded, that goodness still existed, that broken people could heal if given the chance. They'd all been broken in different ways. Sarah by Thomas's death, Jack by his family's loss and years of running, Emma by growing up too fast, Lily by poverty and uncertainty. But together, they'd become whole. Not perfect, but real and true and strong. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known since before Thomas died. This was home, not just the house or the land, but this. Feeling this moment, these people who'd become her heart. "Time for bed," she said finally, as the last light faded from the sky. "Can we stay just a little longer?" Emma asked. "It's so beautiful." Sarah looked at Jack, who smiled and nodded. "A little longer," she agreed. So they stayed, a family bound. By choice and forged by trials, watching the stars come out one by one over the Wyoming hills. The mountain man who'd found his way home. The widow who'd learned to hope again. The daughters who'd discovered that sometimes strangers become family and mercy becomes salvation. And in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the mountains whispering their approval, acknowledging that one of their own had finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Home, not a place but a feeling. Not solitude but connection. Not running but staying. Not surviving but living fully, with all the risk and reward that came with opening your heart to others. Jack pulled Thomas's pocket watch from his vest, checking the time by starlight. Almost 9. He smiled, remembering the day Sarah had given it to him, the weight of trust and acceptance it represented. He'd carry it always, a bridge between the man who'd died protecting his family and the man who'd stepped in to continue that protection. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked softly. "How lucky I am. How none of this should have worked, but it did." He looked at her, his face shadowed, but his eyes reflecting starlight. How a man can spend half his life alone and still find his way to exactly where he belongs. "The mountains taught you to survive," Sarah said. "But we taught you to live." "Yes, you did." Emma yawned, finally surrendering to exhaustion. "All right, I'm ready for bed now." "Me too," Lily murmured, already half asleep against Jack's shoulder. They rose together, Jack carrying Lily inside while Emma walked beside her mother. The house welcomed them with warmth and the familiar smells of home wood smoke and bread, coffee and the lavender Sarah hung to dry, after the girls were tucked in. Sarah and Jack stood together in the main room, the lamp burning low, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. "6 months ago, I didn't know if we'd survive the winter," Sarah said quietly. "Now look at us. We're not just surviving. We're thriving because you chose mercy over fear. because you saw a dying stranger and decided his life mattered. Jack touched her face gently. I'll spend the rest of my days trying to deserve that choice. You already do. Every day you stay, every kindness you show my girls, every time you choose us over the easier path of being alone, you deserve it. They stood in the lamplight. Two people who'd been broken by loss, learning to be whole again through love. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang through the grass, and somewhere in the hills, the wolves called to each other, wild and free. But inside, there was warmth and safety and the quiet certainty that sometimes, when you open your door to a stranger, you open it to your future. That sometimes mercy is rewarded not with gratitude alone, but with transformation of the one who receives it and the ones who give it. Sarah extinguished the lamp, and together they walked to their separate rooms. But not for much longer. Soon there would be a wedding, and the family they built through trial and choice would be sealed with vows and promises dot as Sarah lay in bed between her sleeping daughters. She thought about the photograph they'd taken. In it, they looked like they'd always been a family, like Jack had always belonged there. Maybe in some way he had. Maybe some people are meant to find each other, regardless of the winding paths they take to get there. She closed her eyes and slept deeply, peacefully, without the worry that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. Because tomorrow would come and they would face it together. Whatever challenges arose, whatever storms blew through, they would stand as one. A widow and her daughters had saved a dying mountain man, never knowing he would save them in return. That was the truth of it. Not a one-sided rescue, but a mutual salvation. Each had given the other what they needed most: purpose, family, home, hope, God. And in the end, that was worth more than all the gold in the territory. Worth more than safety or comfort or ease. Because love, real love, the kind built on trust and proven through fire, was the only treasure that truly mattered. The last thing Sarah heard before sleep claimed her was the sound of Jack's whistle, soft and distant, playing a lullaby through the walls. A song without words that spoke of belonging, of promises kept, of coming home at last dot in the morning. They would wake to a new day full of possibility. But for now, they simply rested, a family complete, in a house that was finally, truly home.